Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Again, my name is Nathan Dean. I am a senior policy analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. Actually coming to you from Virginia today. Just wanted to say that today's going to be a little bit more of a technical call. We're just going to run through a lot of actions that are happening here in Washington as opposed to broad picture. But as always, if you do have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat. Also, please feel free to reach out to us. So let's go and get it started. What's going on in Washington this week? Well, as we speak, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, is having a hearing on the reschedulization of marijuana. So if you see any movements in the marijuana stocks today, this potentially could be why. This is part of the rescheduling effort, moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Remember, if reschedulization is not decriminalization, the biggest change here is actually the change in tax law for a lot of these U.S. marijuana companies. It's called 280E. Essentially takes your tax rate from about 40% down to around 5 to 10%. Once that decision is made, going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Now, this is a procedural hearing that's happening today. There's actually not much being discussed on the merits. This is a legal, logistical, and procedural hearing. So I don't think you're going to see much coming out of it today, but certainly with these stocks, I like to say these stocks have hot sauce. So these stocks certainly have a lot of movement. So if anything does happen over the DEA, the investors in this space tend to get fairly excited. Now, our general thesis on this is that reschedulization is coming even with the victory of President Trump. There was some Twitter chatter that President Trump a few weeks ago was for full deschedulization. But, just in the interim, I think this schedulization or reschedulization process is going to continue to play out. We'll see when that next hearing takes place. But, I think this reschedulization will take place sometime in the summer of 2025. So let's on Capitol Hill, there's a lot of talk about this continuing resolution or this appropriations bill to keep the Congress and the U.S. government funded past December 20th. So December 20th is the last day the Congress is scheduled to be here. The Senate's supposed to be here on the 20th. The House is supposed to leave on the 19th. Now, if the funding bill has not been extended via a continuing resolution or appropriations, we have a government shutdown. Now, our view is that I don't think you're going to get an appropriations bill. You're going to have a continuing resolution. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You've heard me talk about this in the past. House Speaker Mike Johnson is taking the approach that because the Republicans are going to have the House, the Senate, and the presidency next year, they'll have more leverage when it comes to appropriations. So a short-term continuing resolution that keeps the government funded until March is the best avenue. There are other folks out in the Republican Party, and this, I have to say that I tend to take this view as well, that putting a government shutdown threat in the first 30 days or 100 days of your presidency is probably not exactly what the president wants. Because one of these things, and this is where I think as we go into 2025, my government shutdown spidey sense, if you will, is beginning to tingle more, because we're entering a situation where I think both parties believe that they have the right, or they're on the right side of the call here. And usually when that's the case, that's when you have shutdowns. So I'm not going to say that we're going to have a shutdown in March, but there is going to be time that's going to have to be spent on this, and that is time that President Trump can't get his confirmations through, and it's also time that the Republicans can't use reconciliation to work on tax reform. So we'll see what happens with the continuing resolution, but I think the base case right now is that it goes to March and potentially could increase a little bit of the political drama as well. Also coming up this week, the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations is having a hearing on airline miles, where the CEO of United, American, Spirit, and Frontier Airlines will be testifying. This is a little bit different than what Senator Durbin did in his previous hearing in Senate Judiciary about the credit card fee programs, where he called the airlines essentially banks, because his claim is that the airlines make more money off of these fees than they do operations. But this is the same trend. Now, the hearing this week is going to be more about like baggage fees and additional fees and disclosures and so forth like that. But it certainly is designed to put political pressure on the airlines and also to increase awareness. Because if you remember, this Senate Judiciary hearing, this is a bill called the Credit Card Competition Act, which would essentially increase competition for Visa and MasterCard. And the airlines have said that they would actually do away or diminish a lot of the reward programs as a result. Well, after I watched that hearing, again, my spidey sense went up, and I was like, oh, the airlines are fighting an uphill battle here. This issue is going to come back in 2025. And when I thought the airlines were going to be in a position of strength in 2025, I'm beginning to think that the airlines are in a position of maybe having a little bit of a problem here. So I'm not saying the bill's going to pass. We're currently at a 40% chance, but that certainly can increase if I hear more Republican statements coming out like I did on that Senate Judiciary hearing. So I'm going to be watching the Senate Permanent Subcommittee Investigations hearing to see if that Republican mindset is continuing into the baggage and into the other type of fee space. So certainly keep in mind for that. So other things that have got to happen before the end of the lame duck. Well, obviously you have this farm bill that needs to be done. The farm bill is something that obviously SNAP benefits, food stamps, if you will, a lot of agricultural programs, if you will. Senator Debbie Stabenow, who's the chairwoman of the Senate Agricultural Committee, and also she's retiring, just released her farm bill a couple of weeks ago. Look, if you release a bill a few weeks before the lame duck, it has no chance of passage. So anticipate a 1-year extension of the farm bill to get this into next year, probably at 2024 levels. I don't think if they do go up, it's not going to be much in terms of the total funding. So look for a 1-year extension. And also just remember, we also have the NDA, the National Defense Agency Authorization Act. National Defense Authorization Act. This essentially keeps the Department of Defense going. Congress has historically done this every year. The deadline for this is December 30th. Again, look for that to be done before December 20th. But other programs could be included. Like I'm hearing chatter that a water infrastructure bill could be thrown in there. I'm not hearing much of the other ways of stable coins, other lame duck priorities or anything like that. Just a lot of the cleanup. For example, the National Flood Insurance Program expires. That has to be dealt with as well. A lot of that's going to be dealt with at this end of year cleanup. One thing that's probably not going to be dealt with is the debt ceiling. So expect reporters on January 1st to put out an article saying that the United States is now gone past its debt limit deadline. The deadline was January 1st of 2025. Remember, this isn't the point where markets freak out. This is the point where extraordinary measures can come in. This is where Treasury moves the funds around and actually can continue to pay for the obligations the United States has already signed up for, and they can put this into the second or third quarter of next year. I am hearing some chatter that the debt ceiling could potentially be thrown into the reconciliation process. Not exactly sure about that. Honestly, I didn't anticipate a debt ceiling leverage fight to come anyway. President Trump isn't really one to save for a rainy day. And so I don't think a lot of the deficit hawks are going to be trying to use the deficit or the debt ceiling as leverage. So certainly keep that in mind, but I do think the debt ceiling is going to be an issue. Last thing I want to talk about is tariffs. We've seen a lot of talk about tariffs. President Trump made several statements. He said, 10% tariff on China, 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. We saw Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fly down to Mar-a-Lago last week and have dinner with him. I couldn't figure out what they had for dinner because I was interested. But it, again, is the start of the negotiation. So the way it would work out is there's essentially 3 ways of doing this. It's called Section 232, Section 301, and Section 201. Now, if you use Section 201 and Section 232, and I'm actually talking a lot of what my colleague Holly Fromm has been doing at the moment. She's our tariff expert, and so unfortunately I couldn't get her to call and get her on the call today, but I certainly can in a future session, or you can reach out to Holly. But the idea here is that depending on the section that the president uses, gives you an idea of the process and also of, is it a specific tariff or a targeted tariff? But the way we see this process playing out is that on January 20th, when President Trump comes into office, or January 21st, he signs an executive order, he signs it and so forth like that. But the tariff doesn't start on day 1. The tariff instructs the Commerce Department to go find a finding and to come back within and to justify the president's tariff. Now, that finding can be quick. It can be 1 month, it could be 2 months, it could be 3 months. But after that finding, the tariffs commence. And in fact, our friends over at Bloomberg Economics, and this is our U.S. chief economist, Anna Wong, and I can send a copy of this to you if you'd like. It's on the terminal as well. It's on the terminal, but there's also a Bloomberg News article about it. They did analysis of the tariffs, and they thought the tariffs would come in 3 waves. You would have a first introductory tariff in the summer of next year. You would have a much broader tariff coming at the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026. And then you would have, more micro tariffs or more specific tariffs coming in the mid of 2026. So, obviously there's a lot of questions. Again, it's a negotiation, but people have been asking me of what are the top threats/opportunities that come with the Trump presidency? What are the highest priorities? And I keep coming back to this idea of tariffs in immigration reform. If you look at the picks that President Trump is picking for his cabinet, it really bumps into essentially what I call three sectors. You have the pro-tariff sector, like Jemias Greer at the Trade Representative. You have the pro-Wall Street, Scott Bessent, to be Treasury Secretary. And then you also have the immigration hawk portion of it, the Department of Homeland Security and so forth like that. And so because the power of the presidency is more powerful when it comes to trade, tariffs, and immigration, I think President Trump is using that as his highest priority because there's more bang for the buck. You don't have to rely on Congress to do certain things, and you can actually implement those reforms at a much faster pace than you could if you were to have to rely on either the regulatory route or the congressional route. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is there's been a lot of questions on President Trump's picks as well and whether or not they can get confirmed. We saw obviously the FBI pick coming out this past weekend. What I'll say is that these picks are now going to come out. Look for Congress to actually sort of slow down now. It's beginning to be the holiday season. For what it's worth, all the lobbyists and the trade association holiday parties are this week because they know people are going to be leaving Washington in the next week or so. And so look for Congress to actually slow down a lot of momentum on that. And they're going to kick the can to January, and they're going to have that fight in January, that debate in January. So you certainly could see people withdraw, but I'm not sure you're going to see senators really come out and say, you got to resolve this issue right now, unless it's a political aspect that they think that they need to resolve. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you. Welcome again. Happy Thanksgiving to all of those who are in the United States. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.